Every guitarist that looks back on their guitar journey looks at it and realizes a few disgusting things they did that would have been so much easier for them if they had not done that and instead done a few other things. And there are 5 super important things I wish I knew when I was starting that can help guitarists of any level today, just like you. When I started playing guitar, I knew nothing about the fundamentals of music. I didn't know what rhythm was, notes were, pitches, timbre, any of it. However, that's not really important except for one of those when you're starting to pick up the guitar, and that is rhythm. Without rhythm, you sound all over the place, and it's nearly impossible to create your own things because rhythm is the easiest way to think about and measure music. By taking the time at the start to going through that super boring process of learning how to divide things by 2 and 4 like this, 1 hand, 1 E and A, will make a world's difference, but it is not going to help you unless you play with a metronome, which is something many people don't do because they find it humbling, and I used to be completely guilty of this. So if you don't fall in the same trap, you'll be able to make gaps of skill progression that many people could never do. And number 2 is learning techniques out of order. This is super annoying because you're going to start discouraging yourself for no good reason. When I try to do certain things, whether it be pinch harmonics, just regular tapping harmonics, and all of that stuff, I couldn't do it for the life of me, but I also could barely play chords and triads very well, and usually you want to be able to do that first before you do something harder. Everyone wants to go and do the big, shiny thing. I was guilty of it, your friend's guilty of it, everyone is, but if you just fast track that and focus on the simple, beginner things for longer, you will build a super strong foundation, and this is why it's super important. If you need to build a tower that's that high and you try to make it on this foundation, when it gets to about right there, it's just going to crumble. But if you take time to do a little bit more boring work at the start when things are novel, and then you build a big foundation of basic things that we'll get into in a minute, you can build a tower that high just because you have the skill set to actually make something. And to rope us into number 3, we're going to talk about that foundation that I would just call a learning plan. When you have a plan to do something, it is much easier to just follow the steps and do the work than to guess and follow some other steps and do half right work, but you could have done this, that was faster. Everyone's going to make this mistake to some degree, but listen to this and you'll be able to fast track that immediately. But you actually have to put hours in, and they're not going to be the most fun things to practice. However, if you just practice all these things like your music theory, very overlooked for a good and bad reason that we'll get into next. Rhythm, never overlook this, biggest mistake you can ever make. When you think you've learned it, take a week, learn it again. There's going to be so many things you miss, and then develop it so you can start learning things like funkier stuff, ska stuff, offbeat, syncopated stuff. Not as hard as it sounds if you have a plan. Chord voices, very simple. Extensions, triads, scales, absolutely essential for understanding keys. And then just how to connect things like scales to chord voices, connecting rhythm to everything, making everything make sense with music theory, and everything in between. Make a plan to learn this. Learn it from the bottom to top, not middle to top to bottom to top like I did. You can just do it faster and simpler. And when you learn music theory the correct way, it's not going to be as stressful because everything is going to build instead of being jumbled together. But that still doesn't explain why it's important to understand music theory. And a simple way to understand this is when you were in school going to write a paper, what was the first thing you did if you knew how to write? It wasn't make an intro, make a whatever skeleton, diagram to organize your thoughts. It was to know your prompt or know your intention. If you don't know how things work, you don't know a proper intention except for maybe trying to sound happy, sad, or tense. But when you understand the music vocabulary, music theory, and things like functional harmony, rhythm, scales, you now have the vocabulary to create a prompt and the skill set to apply it and make it happen without being lucky, which makes learning music theory the right way the 4th important thing I would tell myself way back. And I have a video up on YouTube right now about the proper way I would have redone it. And the fifth thing would have been to record myself more. This is honestly maybe the most important out of all four things, because having something to compare yourself to is the most motivating thing you can do. When you hear you sounded terrible 6 months ago, but then now you hear you sound way better, you now feel like, oh my God, this is really, really good. And you do that over and over and over. And for the first 3 years, that compounds amazingly. So you should just do it, even though you might feel like you're making a fool out of yourself. And another cool side of this that I think is even more important is when you have a video of you playing and you compare it to a professional playing, you can see how their hand moves differently in comparison to yours and how they're reaching along in their strategies of attack for the same song compared to you. Doing this helps you see what you're doing, emulate a person you really, really love, because obviously they're going to have, almost near perfect form most of the time, and just bridge that gap. Do it over and over and over and over and over again. You're going to progress just like that and pick up on so many little nuances. And in the past year, that has made the most results out for me, besides some of you just giving me actual decent advice in the comments. And of course, if you want to go back and understand some of those most important things like functional harmony, watch this video and subscribe for more guitar content if you want to learn it on a deeper level, but faster than anywhere else on the internet.